Drill Sergeant Dornan by Interfectorem, read by President Richardson, President of these great United States and President of the Enclave. Note: the author, Interfectorem, asked that I inform you, the listener, that this story is not available on fanfiction.net at the moment, since he has only just toyed around with this idea, but thought it would be fun to post an audio version of what he has so far on YouTube. At the moment, he is still more focused on completing his story titled Paul's Letter to Rome, or at least he would be if he hadn't made that comment about my dear Agent Horrigan's preferred weaponry and suffered his accident.
I ripped his guts out and splattered his leaking, muty corpse all over the fucking wall.
Thank you for that, Agent Horrigan. I'll take it from here.
Fine, but I'm going to be reading the fun parts.
Okay then, I don't have an issue with that. Anyway, and without any further ado, here is the story. Chapter 1. A New Day for America. Late April 2241. Sergeant First Class Arch Dornan, better known simply as Sergeant Dornan by those who knew him, and Sergeant or Drill Sergeant by those who feared and respected him, sat across from his commander in the barracks wing of the oil rig. The desk was large and spacious, the chairs cushioned from leather, and countless hours of people sitting in them for the past 164 years of use. The papers atop the desk sat neatly arranged and organized, ready to be marked by the assortment of pens and stamps, but all the paperwork was done now, so the sergeant and his commander, Captain Howard, remained focused on the little radio beside the desk, waiting for the special announcement. As the President of the once great United States and current President of the currently Supreme Enclave went on with his State of the Union address, the sergeant began tapping his knee, awaiting the ending. Sergeant Dornan thought of those outside awaiting the news as well, and the sergeant's face grew a smile at the idea of what was coming. His eyes went to the power armor bays against the back wall. There stood two suits of the Old World military and New World Enclave's supreme technology. Sergeant Dornan admired his commander's suit in Bay 1. He really liked the charcoal paint of the Advanced Power Armor Mark I. He certainly had to admit on numerous occasions that he was impressed by the purple Tesla bulbs Captain Howard's friends in engineering assisted in outfitting onto his suit. Although Sergeant Dornan always thought internally that the Tesla mods were a bit silly, since he, unlike his captain, had been to the mainland before and knew that the Tesla mods were relatively pointless against the savages of continental America. While the Tesla modifications were great at dispersing a burst of concentrated laser or plasma beam, they were of little use against the armaments of the mainlanders, who mostly relied on conventional combustion weapons, if not sharpened sticks and stones. No, Captain Howard's armor certainly befitted an esteemed officer, but Sergeant Dornan's heart would always remain in the clutches of practicality, as demonstrated by the simplistic armor he owned in Bay 2. Just then, Sergeant Dornan, Captain Howard, and the attentions of the two veteran troopers beside the door went to the radio on the desk as the President spoke on. With the establishment of our outpost at Navarro on the mainland, and the successful pacification measures taken by our gallant forces there to ensure the fortification's permanence, I must turn my address specifically to those soldiers and civilians of the Enclave here at my home in the Pacific. It is time to begin the transition of our forces to the mainland. There is still much more work to be done, I assure you, and... Byrd, Vice President Byrd, please step away from that. Please don't touch that. Don't give me that look. I'm not going to ask you again, Byrd. No. No, that's okay. Just outside will be fine. No, just send him to Dr. Curling if the good doctor has a moment. Thank you, soldiers. As I was saying, as it has been mentioned previously, the operational test to attempt recruitment of certain mainlanders has reached a consensus among the people and those esteemed individuals of the United States Chemical Corps. That said, for those of you at Control Station Enclave, please ensure you give Sergeant First Class Dornan a congratulatory thanks, for he will be leading the recruiting test of those mainlanders who seek to rejoin the United States of America and its armed forces. He will be setting about this most crucial task in the immediate days, and it will not be an easy one, so I hope you all offer him the best of luck in his departure. Captain Howard took his black polished boots off the desk and stood as Sergeant Dornan did. The captain straightened his coat and straightened his black barracks cover, ensuring the Enclave E and its 13 stars were facing right at the sergeant as he extended a hand. "It looks like that is it, my sergeant. Congratulations." Sergeant Dornan shook his captain's hand, and the officer shook Dornan's vigorously with the most prideful smile. "Thank you, sir," said Sergeant Dornan with equal pride in his voice and equal firmness in his shake. "I've been ready for this for a long time now." "We all have, Sergeant. You have been such an inspiration to us all." The troopers by the door staring at the two behind, the glowing orange eyes of their newly issued Advanced Power Armor Mark I suits, lowered their glowing green plasma rifles, and the two of them broke their military demeanor as they began to clap for the sergeant they'd known so well. The captain broke his grip with Dornan and gestured to the exoskeletons in the corner of the room. "I think it's time you set about your task, my sergeant." Captain Howard grabbed the small folder from the desk and extended it to his now former Sergeant First Class of 1st Platoon, and Dornan took it, knowing without a word that his new orders were inside, as he said, "Of course, sir," with determination in his eyes as he stepped to his armored exoskeleton in the office's Bay 2. Placing the orders inside the small pack attached to the hip of his suit, the man took a deep breath, ensured his black leather interface suit was looking proper, smoothing out the kinks in the shoulders as he reached out, gripped the solid steel of the entry valve, and turned it until the mechanized suit made its signature mechanical click as the suit unlocked and the back opened. Nothing made the sergeant feel more invincible than when he stepped into his armor, and invincible was definitely something he had to be on the mainland, where mutated abominations ran rampant, and mutated humans cleverly masqueraded as pure humans. As he stepped into his pristine suit of black T-51B power armor, the suit closed itself shut, and just like always, he thumped the white E surrounded by 13 stars in the center of his chest plate to ensure he was firmly in control of the vehicle. The display showed the 100% functionality and status of the armor, and just as the audio sensors of the helmet turned on, he heard Captain Howard say, as he stood before him, "We'll try to get you one of the new Mark I suits as soon as possible, so try to make do with the T-51 for now." The captain lifted the plasma caster from the rack between the power armor bays, and the sergeant took it in his hands as he replied, "Of course, sir. Thank you again." The captain grinned and motioned towards the hydraulic 2-ton door to the office where the other two troopers were waiting for the cue to lead his departure. The captain turned to the door and, with a final smirk, motioned for Sergeant Dornan to carry on with his departure at the words, "Now, come on. I'll follow you out." As Dornan stepped slowly and authoritatively towards the door, he relished the feeling of being inside his favorite armor and thought about what the captain said a moment ago. Although it wasn't necessarily true that the Advanced Power Armor Mark I was new, since technically the Army Corps of Engineers completed it around 2 decades ago, it was only recently being issued at large to the active duty forces. He'd worn the Mark I before on his trip to the mainland a few years ago for the excavation mission, and he did like it, but he never truly much cared for the look and feel of the newer armor that seemed to make those who wore it look like bugs with the flat snout shape of the eyes and breathing tubes coming out of the top of the head rather than the front of the face shield. Although the newly issued armor was stronger than the T-51B and T-45D, in just about every way, the Mark I was not the newest armor of the Enclave, for there were currently a few suits of the Mark II, which was adopted predominantly by the President's Secret Service. Even though the Mark I was the strongest of the strong and gave the American soldier the appearance of the enemy's Black Devil, he could not figure out why he still preferred the T-51B. Perhaps it was a comfort thing. After all, Sergeant Dornan had been trained in the T-51B. He obtained half his simulation ribbons in the T-51B, and it was what he wore for years during the countless patrols and guards over the years on the top side, and as part of Enclave Control Company or internal security. But perhaps his preference came from history and legacy. As he stopped in front of the door between the troopers in Mark I, he thought of how the armor he wore had beat the Reds in Alaska and Anchorage. It had crushed the communists in the latter days of the Yangtze. It had obliterated the communists throughout the march to Beijing. It had destroyed infiltrators and insurrectionists during the food riots and urban panic. and it had been used by his ancestors who kept the president safe in the days before the nuclear war. Soldiers wearing this armor had kept the United States alive when the rest of humanity was reduced to ash and cinders. But then, the door opened. He stepped through the doors with the troopers, and as the cheering broke out, he was reminded that he wasn't just part of the old world military, a legacy of America. He was a part of something brand new. He was part of the Enclave. He was a part of the forces that would retake the continent that rightfully belonged to him and his ancestors. He felt the presence of his now former captain behind him, and a tear grew in his eye as he thought, whenever they can issue it, I will wear the Mark I. I will wear it proudly as I forge the next generation. I will wear it with pride for the Enclave, for America, and for God, in that order. He followed his 2 escorts from the door to the commander's office, seeing the squad bay lined with racks and lockers and vacant power armor bays, and his now former trainees he'd grown so fond of, lining the way forward. Each one of his former training platoon standing on the line in their default green and white training T-51B. Their voice emitters turned to full volume as they clapped and cheered for his departure. The esteemed sergeant kept his military composure, but couldn't help himself from waving every now and then as he heard the trainees cheering for him, shouting things like, "Give 'em hell, Sergeant Dornan. Don't be too easy on those second-rates, Sarge. We're going to miss you, Sergeant Dornan. Give any mutants you kill a double tap for me, Sergeant." As he neared the end of the squad bay full of so many trainees beneath the fluorescent ceiling lights and dark metal walls, he found his old trainees weren't the only ones waiting to give him a farewell. Crowding the main entrance to the barracks wing were citizens of the oil rig, all wearing their signature blue Vault-Tec-style jumpsuits. The men, the women, the children, and so many doctors in their lab coats and suits cheered as he passed them, each crowd lining the way forward, punctuated by a soldier of America standing tall above the rest in their black Mark I armor. The departure from the barracks wing showed the sergeant just exactly what he was going to be fighting for on the mainland, and the scene made him more than ready. Eventually, the crowd began to thin, and those back by the barracks entrance began to disperse and go about their way as he went through the 10-ton door to the detention center and upper labs. Through the long, dark metal corridors of Control Station Enclave he went, past the dorms and labs and residences, through the heavy sector doors and up the immense stairs, passing the proper authorities of internal security until reaching that final blast door to the top side. The doors had not been opened in a while, and although the salty air of the sea made these last doors give a deafening creak regardless of how frequently used, that last blast door creaked open, and Sergeant Dornan heard Captain Howard place his breathing mask on beneath his officer's cap just before the sergeant saw the gray sky of the lowering black door. The party emerged onto the upper deck of the oil rig, the government refuge over 130 miles off the coast of what was once called San Francisco, and he could see the occasional raindrop dot the visor of his helmet. Up one more level, the group walked until they were staring at the platform of the transport vertibird that would take him to the recently established mainland base of Navarro. The aircrewman saw them step up and hopped in the back after giving the captain a salute, and Captain Howard gave the pilot another salute before the sergeant turned around to give his captain a final farewell. "Captain Howard, it has been an honor," said Sergeant First Class Dornan. The captain adjusted his breathing mask and met eyes with Dornan beneath the visor of his cap. "The honor is all mine, Sergeant." The captain paused, glanced at the sky, obviously nervous about being outside the safety and thick walls of the control station refuge. Dornan saw this unease in the officer, and it prompted him to say, "It isn't black rain, sir. The larger mainland has been clear of atmospheric fallout for the past near 140 years, according to the Chemical Corps." The officer meets the eyes behind the steel T-51 helmet and says, "I know, Sergeant. It's still quite an experience being topside. Still felt it might be worth a few Rad-X tablets, though, huh?" This made the NCO chuckle briefly, knowing he himself did the same thing despite his armor on his first few sentry patrols on the top of the rig and during his first mission to the mainland. Suddenly, the officer's expression grew more serious as he said to the sergeant inside the heavy steel suit, "Still, the people you will be working with descend from those who weren't spared the black rain." "I understand, sir. said Sergeant Dornan during the captain's short pause. The captain grew another look of pure determination as he added, I am under the impression from my work with the colonel that these ones have had a majority of the screening already done. But I want you to understand that these are still what the higher-ups have deemed second-rate humans. The captain paused again, looked out to the east, the faint light of the sunset piercing the dark, rainy clouds over them, when the propellers of the VTOL transport aircraft slowly began turning. I don't need to tell you that you are to treat them like their status dictates. They are not mutants. They are not humans. They are our allies. They are pure enough to lay down their lives for us, to use our equipment, but they are not one of us. The sergeant let out another militaristic, I understand, sir, and the propellers of the transport, Vertibird, began to spin faster. Show them no mercy, Sergeant. Show them who we are, how they can become like us. Treat them harshly, but treat them fairly. These are the ones who will fight whoever, or whatever might remain after Colonel Dr. Curling's project is completed, understand? I understand, sir, said Sergeant Dornan before that last part made him ask the question that had been in the back of his mind for weeks. Sir, just out of curiosity, but when is the Curling project expected to be completed? The officer thought for a moment, and the propellers became almost deafening as he shouted over the whir of the dual rotors. Just a few months from what I've heard. No official dates yet, but it will be here before you know it. Captain Gannon will be able to disseminate that information when it's known, but you have your orders, so just focus on them and do what you can to make as many second-rate soldiers we can use in the meantime. At that, there was nothing more to say. The rotors picked up even more, the rain picked up as well, and the two men raised their hands to one another in salute before Captain Howard left Sergeant Dornan with the final words, I know I speak on behalf of the control station's armed forces, the force at Navarro, the President, and all pure humans, when I say that I have all the faith of what's left of humanity in you. Passing the escort troopers, Sergeant Dornan stepped up into the transport Vertibird, and the two air crewmen in their black jumpsuits and thick helmets welcomed him aboard. The one manning the starboard gun gestured to the large bag beside the reinforced chairs next to him and shouted over the whir of the blades and closing hydraulic ramp door. That's your issued equipment, Sergeant! Dornan nodded, glanced over the bag, seeing the weapon barrels poking out, knowing that the thing was full of ammunition, equipment, uniforms, and everything ingestible or mechanical he would need for mainland operations before needing resupply at whatever armory Navarro managed to set up. As the vehicle began to rumble and the sergeant took his place on the sturdy reinforced seats of the starboard side, he heard the voice of the pilot tune into his helmet's audio intake frequency. Ready to go, Sergeant First Class Dornan? The sergeant set his heavy plasma cannon beneath the seat, opened the pouch on his hip, withdrew the orders, and began to read them as he answered the pilot. Ready, sir? The pilot only acknowledged by clicking off his connection with Dornan, as the aircraft began to rumble like never before as it lifted off the ancient helipad atop the Poseidon oil rig, Control Station Enclave. Author's note. It might be needlessly worth mentioning that the story may take some slight creative liberties with certain things like layouts of locations, characters, and specific events. I try very hard to stick to the lore, but I think it will be obvious that I'm trying to put a realism or real-world touch on this faction in the time before the events of Fallout 2. I'm trying to capture what the original creators of Fallout 2 were going for, in a sense, rather than what they could show in an isometric trimetric style game made with the limited technology of 1998. Chapter 2. Welcome to Camp Navarro. 35 minutes later, the transport Vertibird lowered to the ground, the steady rock of the vehicle in airplane mode turning once again into a violent rumble as it transitioned to helicopter mode. The shaking grew even worse before the heavy jolt as it touched the ground and the hydraulic door opened. He emerged from the darkness of the cabin illuminated only by egress lights and flicker of onboard systems. He stepped off the ramp into the darkness of the mainland base of Navarro with the sunset now gone. He briefly wondered why the lights of the base weren't on, but this question seemed to answer itself with the glow of several sets of glowing orange eyes staring at him as he stepped onto continental America. They were in hostile territory. A cluster of figures stepped forth towards him, and he turned on his helmet light to be greeted by the welcoming party, the staff of his new command whom he would acquaint himself with later. Through the darkness of the wasteland, the soldiers in black armor, with glowing orange eyes, led the new arrival to the southeast quadrant offices. The offices themselves connected to the control tower next to a kennel, where rabid pure dogs and wasteland mongrels barked into the moonlight, as well as the passing troopers on patrol. Through the door, Sergeant Dornan checked in with his new commander, Captain Gannon of the current topside security forces of Navarro. After the introductions, formalities, and overview of his new orders, the captain, while accompanied by the soldiers of his platoon, stood and departed to give the newly arrived Sergeant First Class a tour of his new post. There will be more to say about the sergeant's new captain, who was in his platoon, what his orders were specifically, more to say about the base, but for the time being it should only be said that the new platoon sergeant would be learning a lot more about his new world, right alongside the people he was sent to forge in the Enclave's brutal furnace. That night, under the cover of a black, rain-leaking sky, he was escorted around the base, given the ability to survey the perimeter turrets as the vertibird that took him to the mainland was loaded up with cargo that the Navarro forces gathered for shipment back to the oil rig. He was shown to the chow hall, shown the 2 large hangars for vertibirds on standby or undergoing repair. He was shown to the radar dish that allowed for comms with the government back home in the ocean. He was shown to the storeroom and the maintenance bay, where teams of mechanics worked on repairing objects recovered by patrols well into the night. He was then shown to the main entrance, where more soldiers in the Mark I armor with the glowing eyes stood outside the guardhouse, behind the sandbag barricades or retractable steel fortifications, scanning the dense forest surrounding the base for any unauthorized mutants to vaporize on approach. It was at the entrance that the new platoon sergeant was told how his true new charges were past the thick tree line at another facility he would be shown in the morning. Then at long last he was shown to the control tower he passed before meeting his commander. On the ground level of the tall concrete and steel tower, he went through the door. He was escorted past the blinking consoles where his brothers and sisters in scientific fields carried on with the administrative duties of running the mainland operations, before he was taken to the interior elevator that took him down to the main sector of the air station. As the cargo lift sank into the earth, Sergeant Dornan was relieved to be inside the underground of the base, a steel-walled labyrinth of cool lights, reminiscent of what he was used to back in Control Station Enclave. Beneath the earth, he was escorted past the large open bays for the soldiers of humanity, shown the squad bay where he would have his new charges set up, past the armory where all gear and equipment was logged and issued, past the medic's laboratory, and past the data storeroom before stopping short just at the end of the hall where the base doctor's detention cells were located. Turning back around, he was escorted back the way they came, stopping again at the turn in the hall leading to the base commander's office. The new perimeter security company platoon sergeant did not meet the colonel assigned to oversee Navarro that night, but he did not mind. Sergeant Dornan preferred as little time with senior officers as possible, as he felt they historically tended to just complicate things at the company level whenever they got involved. At last, after the tour of his new home, his new duty station, he parted ways with his new captain cordially and with minimal words exchanged by the door to the squad bay he would soon become well familiar with. As the footsteps of the departing captain and the men he brought along in escort faded down the halls, he looked at the empty rows of cots as he heard more footsteps approaching. The pure human, pure American troopers of ended shifts approached the nearby trooper barracks for the rest of their night off, and Dornan shut the heavy hydraulic door to the recruit squad bay behind him to focus. He looked at the 12 empty double-stacked bunks on each side, saw the footlockers, saw the empty power armor bays along the walls, wondering when and if these second-rate humans he was to train would be granted the privilege of serving with the armor befitting a true protector of humanity. He saw the closed door within the recruit's squad bay marked Drill Sergeant Quarters on the wall to his right, and approached it as he withdrew his old orders and the new orders he was given by Captain Gannon. Inside the DS quarters, he was comforted by the rack, reminiscent of his rack back at Control Station Enclave, the desk in front of the wall covered in security camera footage of the squad bay outside, and set his bag of issue weapons and equipment beside the large footlocker. He had all he needed after unpacking his gear, organizing his uniforms, his boots, and filling the armory racks beside the wall of security monitors. He could not wait for his new role in America's rebirth to begin in the AM. There in the dim light of the little reading lamps connected to his private bunk, Sergeant Dornan continued to read his orders until sleep would get the better of him. Beyond the gates of Navarro, beyond the minefield, beyond the scorched perimeter forest, and beside the gas station, at approximately 0700, Sergeant Arch Dornan stood between Captain Gannon and a man who he learned was a crucial part of perimeter security. Although he did not have a rank, Chris was an old second-rate human who bore the disgusting and grody appearances Dornan expected from a wastelander. This, however, was something of a form of cover, since he wore a tattered purple robe made of rags and acted as the first line of defense against the wasteland. It was through Chris that Navarro interacted with wastelanders who drew too close to the facility. The sergeant learned that Chris took on the role of gas station attendant, and although that seemed pointless for a gas station that no longer worked by any means imaginable, his guise was enough to steer away the occasional visitor snooping around the area. Or in this case, keep the aspiring second-rates corralled. "Who are the ones in that group over there?" asked the sergeant, pointing to the group of what looked to be 42 dirt-covered wasteland men and women standing in 2 rows before the time-destroyed truck beneath the gas station awning. Chris replied in a simple, withered old tone, "Them's your new recruits, Sergeant." Sergeant Dornan turned to the group of women and children getting inspected by the medical staff in their white hazmat suits by another rusted-out car husk in the parking lot. "How about the ones in that group by the ancient truck?" This time, Captain Gannon answered, "Some of the recruits were stupid enough to bring their families along." Gannon went on, "We told them not to upon initial contact, but some did anyway. Some of them stepped away and joined another group of mostly men in makeshift armor to the left, kept in place by 6 troopers in Mark I, while others stepped towards a group protected by only 1 trooper in Mark I. Looks like some of the family members failed their screening. Oh well, we told them to come alone." The sergeant first class continued to scan the scene. "And what about that group of armored men those civilians are joining?" Captain Gannon answered dryly, "Some of the other second rates bought mercenary protection for the trip to get here." Dornan shook his head. "Are any of them screened for forced conscription?" Captain Gannon says, "Some were. It also turns out some of the recruit pool failed their second screening earlier this morning." Chris added, 4 losses for the original total, but 2 gained. I'd say that puts you at a grand total of 42, Sergeant Dornan." "He's right," said the captain, and Sergeant Dornan merely nodded as he came to the same mathematical conclusion. Dornan summarizes what he expected, so that mostly mercenary group is going to need to be eradicated, but what about the civilians in the group on the right? Captain Gannon says plainly, "Just got off comms with the rig boys this morning before our breakfast. Word is to bring the ones who pass back to Control Station Enclave. They have a transport coming in later today to drop off supplies and head back with more tech from our retrieval teams. It'll be up to some higher-up back home to decide if they want to adopt some new second-rate civilians or if Dr. Curling needs them for testing on purer humans." Chris asks with a feigned sense of annoyance, "Can't you guys just release the mercs back into the wasteland? I swear I can still smell that pile of ash behind my shack when I'm trying to sleep." "That's a negative. We can't release anyone who has made direct contact with our forces. You know that, Chris." "I know, Captain Gannon," said Chris before adding with a slight chuckle, "I'm not saying let them go. I'm just saying let the patrols take care of it so it doesn't stink up the area. Navarro patrols still have orders to eradicate anyone within a 20-mile radius of Navarro." "I'm just saying to have one of the patrols tail them," Gannon replied to the second-rate gas station attendant security agent without any emotion. "Mainland Operating Protocol Section 4, Line 16 states that no mutants or potential mutants in Enclave custody will be released under any circumstances unless authorized by the highest-ranked individual of the Enclave Armed Forces of the capturing force's current command jurisdiction." Captain Gannon smirked and said in a bored tone, "If you want, you may ask the base commander to grant your request if you'd like. It's been at least 2 months since the colonel killed anyone with that unique plasma pistol of his." Chris said immediately, "No thank you. I remember who I inherited this job from." "Good," said the captain with that slight smirk. The old Wastelander and Enclave ally leaned back against the metal wall of the shack as a man in the OD green jumpsuit with tall black boots and a black patrol cap marked by the Enclave sigil stepped up. Sergeant Dornan saluted the first lieutenant saluted Captain Gannon, and Captain Gannon met the salute before asking the officer, "What is it, Lieutenant Kragor?" The first lieutenant said, "Sir, the last of the screening is done. The group over there is ready to be moved. Schreiber's medics are done with their last tests, and the recruits are ready to be marched inside." The captain said, "Thank you, Lieutenant Kragor. Just have Sergeant Moreno and his team stand by for eradication. Wait till Sergeant First Class Dornan takes over the recruit platoon and have Sergeant Johnson and his men lead the second-rate families inside." "Of course, sir," said First Lieutenant Kragor, before saluting and departing to round up his squad leaders to orchestrate the movement of the pure civilians and the execution of the near-human mutants. When all was set to begin, Captain Gannon finally turned to his new Sergeant First Class and said through the static voice of his Mark I power armor, who, like his friend back on the oil rig, also modified his armor with Tesla bulbs. Sergeant Dornan stepped mechanically over towards the rows of 42 recruits, deemed pure enough to die for America if need be, the formation flanked by 2 soldiers of the captain's heavy weapons squad, and stopped before them. He stood tall in his black T-51B armor. He felt as though he would allow himself to wear the advanced Power Armor Mark I on some day special. That special day was going to be the day that he finally turned this gaggle of near-human, mud-dwelling sacks of should-have-been-incinerated garbage into soldiers worthy of paving the way for humanity's reclamation of the continent. The wind whistled by and all was silent as the new platoon looked at the soldier of America towering over the tallest and strongest man amongst them. At last, just after the silence was almost enough to cause the first brave second-rate to speak out of turn, Sergeant First Class Arch Dornan's voice boomed through the voice emitter of his helmet.
"Welcome to Camp Navarro!"
Chapter 3, Day 1. The recruits of the new platoon had been given a rundown of how to behave while they waited for this very morning. All of them knew, thanks to Chris the gas station attendant, how to stand at attention, what to reply with when asked a question, what to say when their new drill sergeant spoke to the group, and how anything other than complete and total compliance could be quite lethal. The group had already been stripped of weapons, but those 2 former mercs who were conscripted into the recruit platoon were made to remove their makeshift wasteland armor at the first order of the DS. These mercs, though originally not enthused about being disarmed and disarmored upon contact with Enclave forces, were rather sour about their conscription at first. But the piercing voice of Sergeant Dornan and the 2 men in black metal exoskeletons holding Gatling lasers on both sides of the platoon were a great deterrent to any form of noticeable protest. As the 2 mercs disarmored, the rest of the recruits were made to disrobe. Whether man or woman, the recruit was to strip completely down to their underwear, if they had any. The first man in each squad was assigned acting squad leader, and each one walked down the line scooping up the piles of clothes at the feet of each recruit. When all the clothing was collected, the old clothing was deposited into a pile beside the drill sergeant. Then Enclave soldiers scorched the pile with a flamethrower before drill sergeant led the march inside. No steps, no cadences, not yet. The recruits stayed in the 3 ranks of 14 each as Dornan led the column through the faint path through the scorched forest filled with countless mines. Not long after the recruit platoon entered the forest of crooked trees when the group of civilians were marched behind them towards the base led by the aforementioned Sergeant Johnson. After the civilians disappeared into the forest, the group under watch by Sergeant Moreno was formally thanked for escorting the Enclave recruits to Navarro safely, were thanked for serving their new Enclave serviceman or woman as a husband, wife, or child, before they were immediately eradicated. Before the 12 wasteland mercenaries deemed too mutated for forced conscription knew what was happening, they had been reduced to piles of ash before any could scream. The same fate befell the 1 husband, 2 wives, and 2 children deemed too mutated for oil rig cleaning duty or even chemical testing. While Sergeant Moreno led his group's dispersal of the ash around the gas station, Sergeant Johnson had taken the civilian group to the topside chow hall and was told by his captain to assist Sergeant Dornan with the new recruits, as the drill sergeant himself had the wastelanders disrobe completely before showering at the outside showers between the 2 large hangars. The drill chief had great difficulty explaining to the group exactly what a shower even was, but the man had foreseen this sort of thing when he was informed about his potential move to this position months previously. It had been told to him that he was in the running to teach wastelanders how to behave as civilized humans. He had been told these men and women living on the continent, unspared by the government shelters that kept him and his pure human ancestors safe, were little more than savages or barbarians, and he believed it. His first mission on the continent several years back, when he played part in the excavation of the Mariposa military base, and interaction with the locals back then only confirmed this. But he had also been told that his new recruits were going under the designation of second-rate human, which meant that they were afforded the opportunity to show that they could be worthy of human status. So, as the remainder of the recruits' clothes were burned outside the Navarro hangars, the drill chief marched back and forth, peering into the showers and ensuring they were washing correctly. The process took 30 minutes, but he was sure to warn them that they were expected to wash in far less time in the coming days and weeks. Most were too scared to say or do anything in defiance when staring down soldiers in unheard-of black armor and holding weapons that only some had ever seen in old world magazine articles about the pre-war military's latest weapons. Defiance did happen that day, however, at least in some form. Not long after Sergeant Johnson and his group checked in with Drill Sergeant Dornan, saying how Captain Gannon ordered him to assist in whatever way needed, one of the recruits wearing no more than a towel approached the drill sergeant directly. Now this man was thankful for the shower, having apparently only ever bathed before back at his family's ranch, and expressed his gratitude for the ability to properly clean himself. He had known from Chris that the drill chief was to be addressed as Drill Sergeant, or Drill Sergeant Dornan, and he was sure to state this upon approach, but was not sure what to make of the drill sergeant staring at him through the thick T-51 helmet. This silence prompted him to ask his new drill chief, "Sergeant Dornan, if I might ask, what is going to happen with some of our families? Me and some of the others saw them enter the chow hall across the airstrip, as you've said, But he could not get another word out. Before he could blink, Sergeant Dornan had lifted the man by the arms and chucked him into the wall of Hangar 2. The man was not knocked out, he was not killed, but he didn't have the strength to do or say anything but lay there in agony as the drill chief stomped over till he was towering over him.
You will not approach a drill sergeant out of line or out of uniform, soldier.
This prompted those in the showers or waiting for their turn to shower to all look at what happened. This ended when he ordered the others to get back to cleaning themselves in an equally terrifying static voice. As the recruits finished up, and the nameless recruit was tended to by Sergeant Johnson with a stim pack, the kind sergeant said the best way to avoid getting thrown face first into any more structures, or worse, was to forget about anything you might be wanting to ask the drill sergeant about. When the recruits were done with their shower, they stacked their towels as the drill chief instructed, and marched completely naked back across the airfield towards the chow hall. Captain Gannon joined his new platoon sergeant, and as he waited in the lower levels for the rest of the recruits to come down the cargo lift into the underground, Dornan was told that the families allowed inside were being kept in Dr. Schraber's medical bay. No, they are not being taken there for detainment or testing. They'll just be in the medical bay until the transport arrives sometime this afternoon to take them to the rig. No, apparently Dr. Schraber needs the detainment wing for his Deathclaw project. Apparently that is going pretty well. Command is even talking about trying them out in some coming mission to take over a vault. Yeah, apparently Dr. Curling just needs some more pure humans from a control vault in order to perfect the cure for the project. Likely not. It'll take some time to get these ones here properly trained, but you just take these second rates to the armory for some proper dress. Their disgusting persons are making the men on guard duty nauseous. When all the naked recruits were below, they followed the drill sergeant through the dark metal and concrete halls of underground Navarro to get their issued equipment. Questions about where families were taken were thwarted by the close confines and the mechanical soldiers herding these men to a place marked by the overhead sign saying, Armory. Sergeant Dornan and some of the men under Sergeant Johnson worked quite well with the Navarro quartermaster, a fine man usually wearing the standard Mark I for the Enclave's mainland forces. The quartermaster stood behind his counter in front of the armory cages and guardian of the door to the main storeroom lined with lockers and crates and power armor bays. As the quartermaster, Tech Sergeant Erickson, gave the recruits the rundown of what was going to be issued, his men came out of the back. Sergeant Dornan warned them of what was to come, and they stood by, ready to fetch what was needed from the back room as the recruits lined up, the line going out the door. As the quartermaster finished his address to the new recruits, Dornan had received his request from the armorers, broke the box open, and began to walk down the line of recruits, handing out the Enclave's very own EIM, or Enclave Indoctrination Manual. The recruits awaiting their issue were ordered to read the manuals, to memorize it as best as possible, and told that talking or looking around in general was to be punished severely. It only took 2 more recruits getting chucked violently into the walls for the message to be firmly cemented, as the gear issue was underway. This was slow, but it was important, as each naked wastelander stepped up to the counter before the quartermaster. There they greeted the quartermaster as Tech Sergeant, just as instructed by Dornan before receiving their first round of gear, moving down the counter, collecting, and stopping as instructed. First, of course, was underwear. Each recruit was issued 7 sets of black underwear, 7 sets of black undershirts, and 7 sets of thick black boot socks, before being stopped and ordered to dress before moving on. The recruit was issued a black assault pack, a carrying device similar to a backpack, and then given a black duffel bag. The recruit was to fill their duffel bags with the underclothes and to leave the assault packs alone. The recruit was then sized for their uniforms by one of the armorers before moving down the counter. The recruit would collect a black utility belt, 2 black canteen pouches that would be attached to said utility belt, and 4 black ammunition pouches that could each contain 2 microfusion cells. The recruits would then collect 2 black canteens for said black canteen pouches. All of this was stuffed into the duffel bag before being ordered to stop. The recruit would stop before the returned armorer carrying 2 sets of black cargo pants and 2 sets of black long-sleeve fatigues with a white Enclave E stitched above the left side pocket and surrounded by the accompanying 13 stars. The recruit would then dress in the black uniform. The recruit was then moved down the line where they were sized for a set of black boots. The armorer would return to the recruit with 1 pair of black boots that the recruit was to immediately put on, and the other to never be worn again outside of inspection from a colonel or higher. When the recruit was wearing the black uniform and boots befitting an Enclave recruit, the recruit would approach the counter again. Back at the counter, the recruit would be given an individual first aid kit, IFAC, a hygiene bag filled with everything they would need to take to the showers or for nighttime care. They were given a personal notebook and set of pens that they were to take notes on during classes and carry with them at all times. The recruit was issued a handheld Geiger counter, a rad bag, a bag much like the hygiene kit that contained tools and medications for the treatment of radiation. The recruit was issued a pair of cold weather gloves, a pair of combat gloves with a built-in grip, a weapon repair kit, 3 days of field rations, and a heater pack for the cooking of field rations without a fire. The recruit was then given a field light and water purification kit before stopping by the entrance to the armory storeroom, still stuffing each item into their duffel bags and not the assault packs. There were, of course, more items in the mix, especially near the end. Everything from black tarps to black bedrolls, fire kits in a black case, black straps, black blankets, black rope, a black 8-pointed patrol cover/cap with the white E, Enclave branded boot polish, etc., etc. Everything a soldier or just wastelander could ever need for life in the wastes or life in an unforgiving environment like any combat zone was issued, usually in the Enclave's signature black and in a pouch or portable bag that had the E surrounded by 13 stars stitched somewhere on it beside the designation of the bag's contents. At last, the sergeant would very loudly instruct the recruits how to carry their weapons when issued by demonstrating with one of the spare AER-9s from the armory as an armorer sized each recruit for vest and helmet. The recruits were each issued a sturdy black vest infused with leather and ballistic fiber. These vests were put in the duffel bags before an armorer would return with a solid black ballistic plate that would be fashioned to the front of the vest at a later time. The armorer would return with the issued black helmets of the old world military before finally returning with a demilitarized AER-9 laser rifle. Even though each rifle was issued without the titanium-lined photonic emitter and was thus useless even with a microfusion cell magazine, the recruits stood by at the end of the armory, their weapons slung, and reading their indoctrination manuals in the parade rest position. They'd been told that any talking would be met with violence and that any misuse of their weapon would result in immediate eradication. One by one, each recruit went down the line, going from naked to enclave soldier, soldier of America in appearance only. Around halfway through, the sergeant was approached by the captain. The captain received his status update before the drill sergeant was told that he would need to lead the recruits to Dr. Schraber's wing of the underground for their IFF chips. This had completely skipped the sergeant and even captain's mind, since every enclave citizen had their IFF chips installed never more than 10 minutes after being born. Apparently, the doctor thought ahead and had the base commander shut off the base's turret defenses this morning so the robotic laser turrets would immediately rip apart the second rates upon stepping into sensor range. The DS asked if the uniforms would work temporarily, but it was said that only enclave power armor had integrated IFF chips installed, and base command still did not trust recruits with power armor on day one at this time. In the end, Dornan was taking the recruits to get the new recruits' tracking chips installed after the gear issue anyway, so the IFF chips would not be much more of a burden. In the end, the recruits had finished up, and the 42 new enclave recruits were marched through the halls to the research wing of the base where Dr. Schreiber and his staff were able to install both IFF and tracking chips in each recruit before too long. Thankfully, the gear issue took longer than expected, and since the vertibird from the control station arrived early, the new recruits didn't have a chance to run into their families, if not executed, during their trip to the research wing. By the time the last recruits were getting their chips installed under their skin, and by the time they each got some additional vaccines to prevent barbarian diseases, the families who passed screening were boarding the transport vertibird to the Pacific for either enclave citizenship or chemical core testing. After the chips, it was midday, although none of the recruits would ever know that if not for the clocks on certain walls in the underground. The recruits were escorted to the recruits' squad bay, forced to skip out on lunch, assigned a bunk and bunkmate, and there, the fun really began.
Gear online. Ready. Move. 10-9-8-7-6-5-4-3-2-1-0.
The recruits would grab their duffel bags they'd hung off the back of the racks, empty their duffel bags onto the ground and shout, "Done drill, Sergeant," just as instructed earlier. The mechanical black soldiers with glowing eyes carrying weapons that could destroy a death claw with little to no effort stomped back and forth.
Assault packs up. Ready. Move. 2019, 18, 17, 16, 15, 14, 13, 12, 11, 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0.
The recruits would sort through the gear, hold the empty assault packs out in front of them, and shout, "Done drill, Sergeant," at the booming
0.
of their drill sergeant.
Assault pack left hand, blanket right hand. Ready. Move. 20, 19, 18, 17, 16, 15, 14, 13, 12, 11, 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0.
The sergeant would walk down the line, ensuring each recruit had X item extended out in front of them by the end of the countdown.
Blanket and pack. Ready. Move. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0.
It went well for the most part. The recruits were always there by the end of the countdown. Most were too afraid to even accidentally screw up. And one by one, each item designated by the manuals as belongs in a field/combat/assault pack was put in the assault pack, always counted down. Everything from the blanket to the rations to the tarps to the ropes to the straps to the IFAC was in the assigned assault packs before the DS showed his new second rates how to roll their bedrolls and securely fasten said bedrolls to the bottom of the packs. Then it was time for the rest of the contents scattered in front of each recruit. The lockers were opened, and in went the duffel bag. In went the spare shirts, the spare underwear, the other trousers, the other blouses, the other socks, the hygiene kit, the boot polish, and on it went. Anything that was not needed for the field or duty was generally placed in the divided lockers at the foot of each bunk after DS Dornan confirmed that they had said item. The countdowns never stopped. The countdowns would not stop for weeks. Every single thing Dornan had his recruits do, no matter how small, would be counted down. Whether it was sorting through a stack of gear and holding a hygiene bag out in front, it would be counted down. Whether it was sending the recruit platoon to the recruit squad bay's bathrooms, it was counted down. Whether it was brushing their teeth before bed, it was counted down. Whether it was showering off after a march to the chow hall across the airstrip, it was counted down. The amount counted down depended on the tasks, but each movement was never less than 10 seconds, and usually never more than 100 seconds. In reality, though, Sergeant Dornan had been learning how to count down for years and practicing for just as long. Because of that, a 10-second countdown usually ended up being no more than 5 seconds in reality, and a 100-second countdown usually ended up being something like a minute. If needed, he would add an additional 100 seconds for whatever task it might be. But it is believed that the most terrifying thing about Sergeant Dornan amongst the recruits of this first wave of second rates was the fact that he never, not even once, skipped a single number, no matter the countdown. Perhaps the only times in the squad bay during the first weeks that the recruits' actions weren't counted down were certain moments spent polishing shoes, stripping weapons, and sleeping normally. Over the course of 5 hours after entering the squad bay that first day, the recruits had been shown how to pack their assault packs, how to pack their lockers, how to make their beds, how to rack their issued weapons, where to stack their equipment and helmets. They were shown how to iron uniforms through the use of wall-mounted pull-down ironing boards with connected irons attached to the squad bay walls. They were shown how to polish shoes, although this would be elaborated upon. They were shown how to stand, how to speak, how to salute, how to walk, how to shave, and even how to properly use the bathroom. Sergeant Johnson of Captain Gannon's Perimeter Security Company assisted the new platoon sergeant for most of the day, and in coming days. But Dornan was able to do most with his terrifying self alone. When it became known that the captain was going to have Sergeant Dornan take the recruits for evening chow, he had the recruits sit cross-legged in formation in the center of the squad bay and simply study their indoctrination manuals while he awaited further order. It was here that it became known that some of the recruits didn't have the reading ability past that of a 10-year-old enclave child. Those recruits were met with the appropriate remarks of,
"What kind of dumb shit mutated communist pile of rad scorpion shit doesn't know how to read their own armed forces service manual?"
Of the 42 recruits, 6 of them admitted to being one of those above, and he marched them to Dr. Schraber across the underground in order to get their intelligence updated. Since the Enclave was so close with the Vault-Tec Corporation before the nuclear war, the Enclave had easy access to some of their best technology. The 6 recruits were sat down with the doctor, had a Pip-Boy placed on their arms, and then the arm-mounted computers were hooked up to lingual enhancers. Once the device was powered on, and once the lens was situated over their eyes, the flash was initiated, and each of the 6 had all the necessary information to make them at least as literate as a 20-year-old pre-war man instantly flashed into their minds. Upon return to the squad bay, Sergeant Dornan found his recruits as well as the captain. There, the sergeant first class caught his commander up on the status of the recruits and agreed to march them to chow after one more thing. Dornan knew what he was going to do after chow, but he had to get his recruits ready.
"Back online. Ready. Move. 20, 19, 18, 17, 16, 15, 14, 13, 12, 11, 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0.
Done, drill sergeant.
Flak jackets online. Ready. Move. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0.
Done, drill sergeant, screamed each man and woman, having removed their heavy ballistic vests from the racks and held them out in front. They'd been shown how to unfasten and don them earlier, so the next order was, of course,
Flak jackets on. Ready. Move. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0.
Done, drill sergeant, screamed the recruits, each standing there in their full uniforms and flak jackets.
Chest plates online. Ready. Move. 10, 9, 8, 0.
Done, drill sergeant.
Chest plates on. Ready. Move. 10, 9, 8, 0.
Done, drill sergeant.
Helms online. Ready. Move. 10, 9, 8, 0.
Done, drill sergeant.
Helmets on. Ready. Move. 10, 9, 8, 0.
Done, drill sergeant.
Load belts online. Ready. Move. 10, 9, 8, 0.
Done, drill sergeant, screamed each recruit holding out their utility belts with both hands. He had the recruits assemble their belts earlier with the appropriate arrangement of ammunition and water pouches, so the next order was, of course, to put them on. Everything was done on a countdown. The recruits needed to understand that speed and efficiency was more than necessary at any time under fire, and although the drill sergeant may have not had to use violence on any of them in the past few hours, he certainly created a high-stress environment, with his voice emitter turned all the way up. All the while, Sergeant Johnson's soldiers continuously stomped back and forth across the squad bay with each order, with each soldier equipped for duty, and after having them stand on line with their heirs at the port arms, they were ready for chow and what would follow. From there, the drill chief was told to take the recruits to chow. Back up top and across the airstrip, the recruits couldn't stare at the two spinning vertibirds unloading more equipment for the Navarro logistics boys before the drill sergeant instructed them on how to stack their weapons in groups of 4 or 3 before he lined them up for chow at the chow hall. There will, of course, be more to say about the chow hall and a lot about the base itself, the different units there, but the most important information to our soldier and the Enclave recruits in general was exactly what was happening around the platoon sergeant. As the recruits finished their evening chow ever so silently, Dornan stood in the chow hall entryway looking out at the sky. There truly was nothing quite like the sight of 2 vertibird transports taking off under the orange sun-setting sky. He watched the vehicles that would take humanity back to reclaim the continent both turn slowly and lift up into the air as they began their journey west. The deafening sound of the whipping blades and rotors ever so slowly faded into the distance before the aircrafts transitioned from helicopter to airplane mode and rapidly disappeared into the sunset as dots.
Fallout outside. Ready. Move. Follow me. You, and you. Stand here, and here. Rest of you, fall in at their left. I said left. Are you fucking kidding me? You sorry half-mutant, half-dog shit, tribal-looking, ugly, motherfucking, stupid, radiation-rotted fucktards don't know your left from your right? 30, 29, 28, 27, 0.
Done, drill sergeant. They weren't done, but it was the best they could do. For the next 3.5 hours, the sun disappeared, the night emerged, and Drill Sergeant Dornan taught the half-human recruits how to fall into formation, how to assemble, how to get their spacing, how to stand, how to shoulder their arms, how to present their arms, when to present their arms, and then how to march. The recruit platoon, of course, did not master any of these skills in those short hours of that first day, but the foundation was laid, and as some of the lights across the air station turned on to illuminate parts of the facilities, the tone was unlike anything any of the recruits were used to. Parts of the base appeared pitch black, parts of the airstrip were illuminated, but the clouds covered the moon, and with the disappearance of the sun, on came the glowing orange eyes of the soldiers in Mark I, assigned to aid the drill chief. Dornan's older model helmet light remained off, but he could see the recruits in the black through the faint glow of the orange eyes surrounding the platoon. As night took over, the platoon of former wasters stood on the airstrip, almost totally surrounded by the blackness of night, but encircled by the orange eyes of their new masters, while the booming voice of their new mechanical teacher pierced the darkness.
Left, face, right, face, port, arms, right shoulder, arms, port, arms, left shoulder, arms, present, arms, order, arms, left, face, left shoulder, arms, forward, march. You do not begin march at the fucking left shoulder arms. Fuck up my drill again and die, you stupid dumb shit cummy cock-sucking butt baby.
Well into the night it went. Day 1 was not over. Phase 1 was yet to truly begin, but the second rates were already well on their way to becoming human allies worthy enough to sacrifice themselves for the Enclave. For the home their ancestors lived upon before their DNA was spoiled by the nuclear fallout of 2077.